She thought she was buying scrap, a rusted-out army surplus truck, abandoned in a government lot since the Cold War. But when Kara Jensen opened the back doors, she found more than just moldy rations and forgotten gear. Hidden beneath the floorboards was a compartment welded shut, and what she found inside would unravel a decades-old secret the military never meant to surface. This wasn't just a project anymore. It was a mission. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing your stories too. And if you believe some mysteries are worth digging for, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode goes even deeper than this one. The air at the surplus yard was thick with heat and silence, that dry, metallic kind that clung to rusted bolts and scorched paint. Rows of forgotten machinery stretched across the gravel, lot like ghosts of wars no one wanted to talk about. Decommissioned tanks with sun-faded armor, crates of oxygen masks, radios missing knobs. It was a graveyard for gear that once mattered and now just collected dust and spiderwebs. Kara Jensen stood near the edge of it all, arms folded, boots crunching against broken concrete as she scanned the lot with mechanic's eyes. Not for glamour, not for nostalgia, for parts. Maybe even a project if she got lucky. The auctioneer barely looked up from his clipboard. Next lot. US, high 70, 2 transport unit. No power. Classified as salvage. Sold as is. A few men in surplus hats glanced over and turned away just as quick. One muttered something about it being a glorified bread truck with a bad axle. Another chuckled. Bet the mice got more horsepower than that thing. But Kara didn't laugh. She kept her gaze locked on the vehicle, camo-painted, sitting uneven on flat tires, vines creeping up its side like nature trying to claim it, and stamped in fading white letters across the side. U.S. Army, high 72. She didn't move, didn't blink. Something about the truck made her chest tighten. Maybe it was the strange boxiness of the cargo hold, longer than standard, or the subtle difference in weld marks along the doors like someone had modified it in a hurry. Maybe it was instinct. That whisper in her gut she'd learned to trust more than most people. But mostly, it was because nobody else wanted it. Starting bid, $100, the auctioneer called out, sounding bored. Silence. 1? 20? Still nothing. Kara raised her hand. 200. The auctioneer blinked, surprised. Then smirked. All right then. 200 going once. She didn't hear the rest. Her mind was already racing. She could strip it for parts, maybe restore the shell, flip it for twice what she paid. Worst case, she'd break even on the scrap, but that wasn't why she bid. When the gavel fell, it wasn't excitement she felt. It was something stranger. Like a thread had been tied to her the moment she saw the truck, and pulling it would unravel more than just wires and bolts. An hour later, the keys still tagged with government inventory tape were in her hand. She walked to the truck and pulled open the heavy rear doors. The hinges groaned in protest. Inside, it was pitch black and smelled of oil, rust, and something older, earthy. Like old paper sealed for too long. The interior was bare, or so it seemed. But tucked deep into the shadows were 2 metal crates, stacked and strapped to the wall. Military issue, scratched, one olive green, one mustard yellow. Kara's brow furrowed. She reached for them, and somewhere deep in her gut, that quiet whisper turned into something louder. Something was not right. Kara parked the army truck at the back of her shop, the tires grinding over the gravel like they were trying to forget how long they'd sat still. The brakes hissed unevenly as she killed the engine, not because it ran, but because she'd rigged a power boost from her shop's tow battery just to get it to move at all. It had taken 4 hours, 2 chains, and one very suspicious neighbor asking if she was stealing government property. Now it sat in the shadow of her steel workshop, where engines went to be reborn or put out of their misery. She stood with her hands on her hips, sweat soaking through her shirt in the late Georgia Sunday. Up close, the truck looked worse. The camo paint was peeling in wide patches. Rust had eaten into the wheel wells and streaked down from every bolt like tears from metal eyes. She tapped the side panel lightly, With a wrench it rang dull and heavy, like something underneath wasn't hollow. She crouched at the rear doors again and opened them fully, letting the sunlight spill in. The crates were still there. They hadn't moved in transport, strapped in tight with ancient webbing that cracked when she touched it. Each crate had old metal handles and locking clasps, but no external markings, no stencils, no ID numbers. That was weird. The military labeled everything, even the empty boxes. The olive crate opened with effort. Inside, canvas pouches, some medical, some empty, a gas mask missing a strap, a folded field map stained with age, and something darker, maybe oil or blood. The mustard yellow crate didn't budge. Its latch was welded shut, not locked. Welded. She leaned in, inspecting it closer. The weld was rough, sloppy, not factory, not field. Rushed. As if someone had sealed it in a panic. She stood back and blew a breath through her teeth. What the hell did you carry? Her own reflection blinked at her. From the side mirror, red hair pulled into a greasy ponytail, a smudge of rust on her cheek, and eyes that never could let something go once curiosity sank its hooks in. Inside the cab, the glove box was jammed shut. She pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside, only a tattered maintenance log and an empty envelope. But the log caught her eye. The final entry had been scribbled, half legible, dated 1987. And beneath it, a single sentence written in fading blue ink. Do not transport to site. Vehicle not cleared. M. No explanation. No initials. No follow-up entry. Kara stared at it for a long moment. This wasn't just a transport vehicle. It had been denied movement, or maybe never meant to be seen again. And now it was hers, legally and fully, with no one to stop her from opening every last bolt. That should have been exciting. But instead, a weight settled in her gut, the kind that had nothing to do with rust or repairs, the kind her father used to talk about when something didn't add up under the hood. She leaned against the truck, fingers running along the rear seam of the cargo hold floor. Something clicked beneath her, touched the softest give, like pressure finding a pocket. Her eyes narrowed. There was a second floor, a false bottom, and welded inside it something someone had gone through a lot of trouble to bury. The shop lights buzzed faintly overhead as Kara cleared space around the rear of the army truck. She rolled her creeper stool into place and lowered herself down, flat on her back beneath the tailgate. The metal was still warm from the sun, and the undercarriage reeked of rust, dried fuel, and something faintly chemical, like antiseptic left too long in a hot room. Her fingers traced the seams of the cargo floor from underneath, where a shallow box frame sat welded into place. At first glance, it looked like standard reinforcement. But the pattern was off, not structural, deliberate. She grabbed her flashlight, angling it into the tight gap between the frame and the floorboard. Weld beads, crude, fresh compared to the rest of the truck. Someone had added this frame, later boxed in the underside of the cargo hold like a hidden drawer. The military didn't do hidden drawers. She stood, grabbed her grinder, and clamped on her face shield. Sparks flew as she scored along the weld lines, the metal shrieking beneath the blade. It took nearly 30 minutes, and 3 cutting wheels, before the plate groaned free, swinging down with a deep metallic clunk. Behind it, darkness. A sealed compartment about the size of a suitcase, flush with the truck's floor and bolted shut from inside. Kara stared at it for a long moment, heart thudding. Then she reached for her crowbar. The compartment fought her. The bolts were stripped, the edges sealed with adhesive long gone dry and brittle. But she didn't stop. She chipped, pried, and finally, with one last tug, the panel snapped loose, the air behind it, exhaling like it had waited years to breathe. Inside was a single case, not military issue, not government standard. It was black, matte, and reinforced civilian tech, but built like a tank. No logos, no locks, just a keypad and a biometric pad with a long dead battery light. Seriously? She muttered. She carried the case inside, set it on her bench, and began to work it open manually. She bypassed the keypad with a multimeter probe, then picked the internal catches through the seam. It took patience, the kind her father had drilled into her when she was still too small to lift a torque wrench. When the final latch clicked, she hesitated. What was she expecting? Drugs? Money? Something illegal? Whatever it was, someone welded a floor shut to keep it from being found, and now it sat in her lap like a dare. She flipped the lid. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. A bundle of rolled film canisters, sealed in foil, a thick manila envelope, a dog tag that didn't look military too thin, with numbers etched across one side and nothing else. And buried beneath it all, a smaller box, lead-lined, heavy. She reached for the envelope first. Inside, documents, photos, handwritten notes. Many of them charred at the edges like someone had tried to burn them but changed their mind halfway through. Some names had been blacked out. Others were still visible, and one made her breath catch. Jensen, Michael E., her father. The air in the shop felt heavier now, like the walls themselves were leaning in closer, as Kara spread the contents of the envelope across her workbench. Some pages were damp, edges curled and darkened from flame. Others were intact military reports, hand-drawn schematics, typed memos with thick red stamps that read, "Confidential, eyes only." But it wasn't just the official tone that unsettled her. It was the handwriting. One corner of a page held a note in slanted print she recognized instantly. Her father's. Kara's fingers hovered just above the page, like touching it would break the illusion. He'd been gone 10 years now. A heart attack. Sudden, no warning. She'd barely been out of trade school, still chasing his shadow around car hoods and socket sets. He never talked much about his time in the army. Just said it was wrenches and bullshit, and left it at that. But this wasn't grease monkey maintenance. These were reports on unauthorized field tech, energy experiments, strange signal testing in unmarked zones. The date on one document hit her square in the chest. The 12th of June, 1987. She remembered that date. It was the day her dad came home early from the base and took her fishing, even though it was pouring rain. She'd always thought it was just one of those rare good days. But now, the idea crept in slow. Maybe he was hiding her. Maybe something happened that day he didn't want to bring home. She scanned the rest of the names. Some redacted, others still there. Lieutenant Patrick Reams, Dr. Ellen Varga, Key PL, Terrell Stroud, all assigned to Project Switchback. She whispered it aloud, testing the feel of it. Project Switchback. Buried in the back of the envelope was a photo. Black and white, slightly torn. 4 people standing in front of the very same HY-72 truck, now parked behind her shop. Her father was one of them. His arms were crossed, his jaw tight, like he didn't want the photo taken. Kara had seen that look before, the one he wore whenever someone asked about the past. But it was the person beside him that made her hand shake. The woman, tall, dark hair in a braid, lab coat open over military fatigues, was staring not at the camera, but toward the ground. And on the back of the photo, scrawled in the same familiar handwriting, Varga didn't trust the brass. Neither did I. They buried it anyway. There was something else in the case, the small lead box from beneath the papers. It had no locks, just a slide latch tight with time. Kara hesitated, her thumb resting against the latch, as if it might burn her. She opened it slowly. Inside was a small device, wrapped in gray cloth. She unrolled it, layer by layer, revealing a rectangular instrument, no bigger than a shoebox, matte black with twin antenna ports and a circular dial embedded in the center. Faint letters were etched into the side. Field transponder, X19V, divided by prototype. No serial number. No manufacturer. Kara stared at it, unblinking. Whatever this was, it didn't belong in a truck. It didn't belong anywhere anymore. And yet someone had gone to great lengths to hide it, and even greater lengths to keep it from ever leaving that truck again. She glanced back at the old army folder, at the singed edges, at her father's name, circled once in pencil, then blacked out in marker. Someone had tried to erase him, but not completely. The next morning, the sky over Glen Hollow was gray and heavy, the kind that promised rain but never delivered. Kara stood at her shop door, mug in hand, staring at the truck parked just beyond the roll-up bay. The case, the papers, the prototype device, all of it still sat spread across her workbench, untouched since last night. She hadn't slept, just read and reread every line in those files until the words blurred. It wasn't just a hidden project. It was something people went quiet over. Something erased. The kind of thing people got erased with. She wasn't scared yet, but she was cautious, and that felt new. Kara had lived her life with her sleeves rolled up and her fists ready. She didn't rattle easy. Until now. She snapped a photo of the device and posted it anonymously on an old Cold War military surplus forum. Just the image, no caption, no ID. Just a shot of the object under a harsh shop light with a soft, "Found this in a gutted army truck, anyone seen one before?" as the post's title. Within 15 minutes, the post was flooded with responses. Half were jokes or wild guesses: Cold War radio, early GPS, homemade Geiger counter. But a few were different. One user, tagged simply as Vector Ghost 42, replied with a message. "Delete this post. You don't know what you have." Another user profile, blank, no posts, no bio, sent her a direct message. "That truck should have been buried. If you're smart, you'll make it disappear again." She didn't respond, but she also didn't delete the post. 2 hours later, her shop's motion alarm triggered. The camera feed showed nothing at first, just wind pushing open the side gate. But on closer inspection, someone had forced the lock. The gate had been snapped off the hinge with bolt cutters. There were fresh tracks in the gravel, almost invisible, except under the right angle of light. She walked the perimeter slowly, heart hammering. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, except the truck. The back doors were wide open. She hadn't left them that way. The yellow crate she couldn't open before was now gone. Not forced. Removed. Cleanly. And inside the cab, on the cracked leather of the front seat, was something that hadn't been there yesterday. A piece of black electrical tape, folded into a small triangle, like a calling card. Kara picked it up carefully, turning it over. Her father used to do this, fold scraps of tape and stick them to his workbench when he didn't want to forget something. She stepped back from the truck, stomach flipping. Someone had been here not to rob, not to destroy, but to send a message, and maybe to remind her who was really in control. Back inside, she unplugged the shop's landline. The street outside felt quieter than usual. The shadows felt longer, and in the corner of her shop, the prototype transponder still sat humming faintly, like it had just woken up. Kara locked the shop's doors that night, front and back, something she hadn't done in years. Glen Hollow wasn't the kind of town where people broke into places, not unless they were desperate. And whoever had stepped inside her shop hadn't been desperate. They'd been careful, professional. She made herself a pot of coffee she didn't need, and returned to the bench, where the documents still lay in uneven piles. Her eyes were gritty from no sleep, but she couldn't let it go, not now, not with her father's name sitting right there in black ink. Jensen, Michael E., Staff Sergeant, Motor Transport Division. Assigned, Pro J. Switchback. She had always known he was a mechanic in the Army, but he never spoke about it. Not really. Just war stories with the edges sanded off. Funny moments, bad meals, that one time in Germany, but never names, never dates, never places that could be checked. Now she understood why. The more she read, the more the project came into focus. Switchback wasn't about building. It was about testing equipment designed to operate in electromagnetic black zones. Environments where no signal, no radio, no conventional electronics would work. The prototype she'd found, the transponder, was part of a classified program meant to create short-range, signal-jumping field relays. Secure, invisible, undetectable. But it had issues. Kara flipped through a brittle memo marked, "Field Incident, the 9th of June 2087. The ink had bled from age, but the meaning was clear. Unit failed under prolonged exposure. Containment breach suspected. 2 team members experienced disorientation and acute neurological symptoms. Recommend asset deactivation until further evaluation. The note was unsigned. Another page, tucked into the back of a folder, held only a few scribbled lines, her father's handwriting again. Varga was right. The signal isn't stable. Reams won't listen. I'm not risking anyone else. If they order transport again, I'm walking. And underneath it, in faint pencil, if you find this, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Kara swallowed hard. Her father had tried to bury this, not just from the army, but from her. He'd left behind years of careful silence to protect her from something he clearly thought was still dangerous. She sat in the quiet of the shop for a long while, staring at that last sentence. Then she reached for the small metal box that held the transponder. It hadn't made a sound, hadn't moved. But something about it felt alive, not like a machine, like a secret still whispering. She hesitated, then opened the back panel. Inside, a power cell intact, shielded and cold to the touch. Below it, tucked in with the wires, a slip of folded paper. She unfolded it slowly. A hand-drawn map, rough coordinates, a location, woods, maybe definitely rural, and a single note scribbled across the bottom. If you're reading this, find Ellen. She knows what they buried. Ellen, Dr. Ellen Varga, the woman from the photo, the one who wasn't looking at the camera. Kara leaned back in her chair, breath catching. Her father hadn't just left behind a secret. He'd left a trail, and someone somewhere was still trying to erase it. It was just past 2 a.m. when the shop phone rang. Kara stared at it from across the room like it had grown teeth. The line had been unplugged hours ago, she was sure of it. She stood slowly, the floor creaking under her boots, and approached the desk. The cord was still coiled, the plug still sitting loose on the floor, and yet the phone was ringing. She picked it up. Silence. Then a click. Then a voice, low and clipped, like someone speaking through clenched teeth. Don't hang up. She didn't say anything. The silence that followed was tense, taut, like a wire about to snap. I'm not here to threaten you, the voice said, but you need to stop digging. That truck wasn't supposed to surface. The case inside the device, it wasn't finished. It wasn't safe. That's why they sealed it. Kara finally found her voice. Who is this? Let's just say, I knew your father, before he walked. That made her freeze. He was one of the few who had the guts to pull the brake before it all went off the rails. They didn't like that, but they respected it. Quietly. Until now. Why now? She asked, gripping the receiver tighter. Because someone, not me, is trying to revive Switchback. Someone with more reach and fewer scruples. And they've noticed the noise you're making. You mean my forum post? It took 7 minutes to hit a monitoring filter. You're being watched. I'm breaking protocol even speaking to you. Then why call me? Because you're not wrong. Your father left breadcrumbs. I figured no one would ever follow them. But now you have. And if you're not careful, they'll follow you back. There was a pause, long and loaded. You mentioned Ellen Varga in the post, didn't you? She blinked. I didn't mention her name. Then I was right. You found the map. You found his notes. Where is she? The voice on the line sighed. It sounded tired. Tired in the way that war veterans and old mechanics get, like the weight of too many years had finally settled in their bones. Off grid. Went dark in 1990. 2 after her lab was gutted. Some think she's dead. Others know better. I can't give you much, but I'll give you this. A pause. There's a post office box in Marlowe's Bluff, just past Highway 38. She checks it every 2 months. If she's still breathing, that's your best shot. And if she's not, then you're walking blind into a world your father tried to spare you from. Kara swallowed hard. Go there alone, the voice added. And Kara, don't bring the device. Not yet. Someone's looking for it. And they're not playing nice. The line went dead. She stood there in the dark, the phone silent in her hand, her breath the only sound. Outside, a truck passed by slowly, too slowly. And she realized this wasn't a story anymore. This wasn't curiosity. This was something deeper, something tangled in secrets so old they had roots. She looked back toward the bench, where the prototype still sat, wrapped now in a thick towel and locked in her tool chest. Then she turned to the map her father had left, the trail of ink fading after so many years. Marlowe's Bluff. She grabbed her keys and her coat. Whatever was waiting out there, answers, danger, or both, she wasn't turning back now. The road to Marlowe's Bluff cut through the kind of country that didn't exist on maps anymore, two-lane blacktop framed by pine and forgotten towns, the kind where gas stations still had analog pumps, and old men drank coffee on wooden benches without looking up. Kara kept her eyes on the road, the map her father had left folded on the passenger seat, and the case, the lead-lined box locked tight in her trunk. She hadn't intended to bring it. She'd promised herself she wouldn't. But something in her gut said it needed to come, just not out in the open. She reached the post office by early afternoon. It was a squat building tucked between a laundromat and a bait shop, the kind of place where nothing changed except the shade of rust on the roof. A single mail carrier sat out front on break, eating a sandwich and watching her without comment. Inside, the clerk barely looked up. "I'm looking for P.O. Box 88, Kara said, keeping her voice low. "Boxes are public access," the woman said with a shrug. "Back wall." Kara scanned the row until she found it 88. A small, dusty brass door with a scratched plastic window. Inside, an envelope. Thin, cream-colored, no markings. She opened the box and took it. No one stopped her. She walked out slowly, turned the corner behind the building, and ripped it open. Inside, one sheet of paper, folded twice. The handwriting was neat, sharp, clinical. "If you are who I suspect, you've already ignored at least one warning. That makes you either reckless or necessary. My name is Dr. Ellen Varga. I was the lead systems architect on Project Switchback, and I've been hiding from its consequences for over 3 decades. Kara stopped breathing. "If you found the prototype, it's not inert. The core may appear offline, but its pulse sensor is proximity, triggered. You've already activated it. That means time is short." She looked toward her car, the trunk. "Do not attempt to power it. Do not take it near any magnetic fields or telecommunications infrastructure. If you've already done so, I pray you haven't triggered what we once feared most." There was a phone number at the bottom. No area code, just 7 digits, underlined twice. She drove to the edge of town, found an old payphone outside a shuttered diner, and dropped in a quarter. It rang once, then twice. Then a voice answered, familiar, calm. "Tell me what color the case is." "Black. Matte finish. About the size of a shoebox." "That's Alpha 1. "Good. You didn't open it." "I did." A long silence. "And the core? Still cold. No light. But it hums. Faintly." The voice exhaled, sharp and fast. "Then we have less time than I hoped." "Who are you?" Kara asked. "Really? I'm the reason your father walked away, and the reason he couldn't tell you why." Kara gripped the receiver tighter. "He trusted you. He said you knew what they buried." "They didn't just bury a project, Kara. They buried something they couldn't explain. The device doesn't transmit data. It listens. It's a passive resonance core. And if it's humming," another pause. "It's already heard something." Kara looked back toward her car. The box was listening. "Where are you?" she asked. "Safe. For now. But I can't help you over the phone. If you want the truth, you'll have to meet me in person. Come alone. Ring the device. But only if you're ready to understand why your father disappeared." The line went dead. Kara stood there, the note still clutched in one hand, the sound of the dial tone echoing in her ear like a warning. She turned back to the car. The box in the trunk hadn't moved, but it might as well have whispered her name. Back in her shop, Kara laid everything out on the bay floor. The files, the transponder, the envelope from Dr. Varga. And one by one, she connected the dots her father left behind. Lines scribbled in margins, notes half burned, but still legible, redacted memos she now read between. The name that echoed through them all was the same: Project Switchback. The file from 1985 described its purpose as Tactical Field Resilience. But deeper into the archive, it shifted. No longer about durability, no longer about communications. It became about isolation. Dr. Ellen Varga's name appeared again in Phase 2 notes. Alongside it, language that chilled Kara to the bone. Field transponder X195 proved unstable in blind tests. Subjective disassociation occurred in 3 out of 6 test cases. Sensory awareness spike recorded after 2.4 minutes of core pulse exposure. Recommend psychological screening of all. Field tech, post-test. Terminated alpha. 7 series after emotional bleed through documented. Emotional bleed through? This wasn't radio tech. It was something else entirely. She opened one of the remaining folders. Inside was a photocopied log sheet titled Field Trial, Controlled Environment, Echo Bay Outpost. Her father's name was there again, listed not as a tech, but as Observer 3. The trial lasted 11 minutes. At the 11-minute mark, power cut. The next entries were handwritten. Do not resume tests. Reams is lying about the readings. Varga knows. I've seen what it does. I'm pulling out. Signed, Michael E. Jensen. That was the day he disappeared from the base logs. Not discharged. Not reassigned. Gone. Kara leaned back, her mind racing. This device, this X-19V transponder, wasn't just military hardware. It had been part of a deeper experiment, one they couldn't replicate or control. And the worst part? Her father had seen it first. She stood, heart pounding, walked to the toolbox, opened the drawer where the device was stored. It sat quiet, still cool to the touch. But when she laid her hand against it, she swore she felt it vibrate. Not in sound, in memory. Images flooded her, not hers. A frozen bay, snow crunching beneath boots. A man's voice shouting numbers. Someone screaming, off frame, and just as fast, it vanished. She stumbled back, breath sharp. "What the hell are you?" she whispered. The device didn't answer. But the hum was no longer faint. It was steady, like a heartbeat. She wrapped it again, double-sealed the case, and looked at the final note her father had left in the margins of his report. They called it Switchback because it was meant to bring us home. They never realized what it would bring back with it. Kara didn't know what Switchback had awakened, but she knew now. It wasn't just a machine. It was a door, and something on the other side was already listening. Kara didn't sleep that night. The hum from the device was faint, but constant. Like the low thrum of distant thunder, you could feel more than hear. She left it sealed in the toolbox, placed inside a locked metal cabinet, and shoved an entire crate of brake rotors on top, just for good measure. It didn't matter. The sensation of it, the pull, was still there. Not dangerous, not yet, but insistent. Like it knew she was getting close. By dawn, she was driving again. Not toward Varga, toward the only other name in the files she recognized, Terrell Stroud. She remembered him. Barely. He'd visited their house once when she was maybe 8. Big laugh, bigger hands, smelled like cigar smoke and machine oil. Her dad had called him T. She remembered how they'd gone out to the garage and shut the door for hours. After that, she never saw him again. According to an old veteran registry, he lived 2 counties over, in a small modular home outside of Denton. She found the address. Knocked twice. The man who opened the door was older than she remembered. His eyes were sunken, but alert. Hair mostly gone. A cane leaning against the wall beside him. He squinted at her, then froze. "Mike's girl?" Kara nodded. "Yeah, Kara." He opened the screen without another word. Inside, the place was cluttered but clean. Military plaques lined one wall. A shadow box held 2 medals. He poured her coffee like it was a ritual, not a favor. and sat opposite her with both hands cupped around his mug. "I figured someone would show up eventually," he said after a long silence. "Didn't expect it to be you." "I found the truck," Kara said. "The High 72. The prototype's still in it." His eyes closed slowly. "God help us. You were part of the project?" "I was part of the cover-up," he said, not bitter, just hollow. "We were told it was comms testing, radio range expansion, field advantage over Soviet jammers. Sounded harmless." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "But the tech never came from comms. It came from something Varga pulled out of a black site project. Experimental resonance. Not broadcast. Reception. The kind of reception that didn't make sense. It didn't pull voices. It pulled presence." Kara's fingers tightened around her mug. "My dad knew, didn't he?" Stroud nodded. "He was the first to say it out loud. After the Echo Bay trial, he came to me, hands shaking, and said, 'T, we opened something, and I don't think it ever closed.' He wanted out. Said we had to seal the truck, get it off grid. I helped him weld the damn thing shut. We thought that'd be the end of it." "Why didn't you destroy it?" Stroud's jaw flexed. "Because he thought someone might need it one day. Someone who could finish what he couldn't." Kara sat in stunned silence. "He left you notes, didn't he?" Stroud asked. "Yeah. A map, coordinates, Varga's name." Stroud stood slowly and limped to a drawer, pulled out a dog-eared folder. Inside was a photo, the same one Kara had found. The HY-72, her dad, Varga, and Stroud, younger, standing off to the side, half out of frame. "I kept this," he said. "Not because I wanted to remember, but because I couldn't forget." Kara studied the photo again. The posture, the distance, the way her father wasn't quite smiling. She understood now he had been scared. Not of the machine, but of what it meant. And he'd buried that fear under silence for the rest of his life. Stroud pressed the folder into her hands. "You're already in it now," he said quietly. "Whatever you do next, make sure it's worth the cost." She left just after noon. The prototype was waiting. And somewhere beyond it, so was Ellen Varga, and the truth her father had died trying to protect. Kara had made it halfway back to Glen Hollow when she noticed the car behind her. It was an old sedan beige, nondescript, a little too clean for a back road. It had appeared 2 turns after she left Stroud's place and stayed a comfortable 4 car lengths back ever since. Never passed, never drifted. Just there. Watching, she checked her mirror again. Still there, Kara took a left toward a rural detour. The car followed. She pulled into a gas station and parked at Pump 6. The car rolled past, slow and smooth, then turned onto the highway without stopping. She filled the tank with shaking fingers. They were watching her. Not online anymore. Here, in person. Back at the shop, she unplugged her computer, wrapped her phone in foil, and threw both into an old toolbox lined with insulation, a makeshift Faraday cage her dad had taught her to build, just in case. She hadn't understood what he meant back then. She did now. When she opened the cabinet that held the prototype, it was warmer than before, still sealed, still silent, but somehow more present. Like it knew it had been followed too. She kept the garage lights off, just the desk lamp, a single pool of yellow glow over her bench as she flipped through the last batch of her father's notes, the ones she hadn't dared open yet. Inside, audio logs, cassette tapes, unmarked except for scratched numbers and the word redline written in faded pen. She didn't have a tape player in the shop anymore, but she remembered one her dad's old toolbox in the attic, packed away with VHS tapes and an unopened 6-pack of beer from 1999. She climbed the rickety ladder and found it, blew off the dust, plugged it in. The machine whirred to life. Static filled the shop. Then his voice, her father's voice, younger, tighter, full of something that sounded too much like fear. Redline log 3. This is Jensen. If you're hearing this, either I'm dead or I finally screwed up enough to matter. Switchback's not a signal repeater. Not really. It's a pattern sync. It absorbs echoes, memories, impressions, from people, from environments, places that carry weight. Kara froze. The transponder started picking up things we didn't broadcast. Not voices, feelings, panic, sorrow, a sense of being watched. Sometimes it even mimicked us. It played back things we hadn't recorded. Stroud heard his brother once. I heard Varga say my daughter's name. He paused on the tape. A breath. A shift of something heavy. This wasn't a mistake. It was made to do this. And someone knew. They just didn't tell us. The tape clicked off. Kara sat in silence. The whir of the machine slowing. The room now darker than before. She turned on her phone for just long enough to check one thing. No signal. Not just low. Dead. She powered it off. Walked to the window. Looked out. Parked across the street, same beige sedan. No lights. No engine. Just waiting. She stepped back into the shadows. Whatever switchback had been meant to do, it hadn't stopped. It had simply gone quiet. And now that she'd found it, the silence was ending. The map her father had left her was already worn soft from folding, its edges curled and ink beginning to fade. She'd stared at it so often, she could trace the lines with her eyes closed, the rough pencil roots, the circle in the woods outside Carter's Ridge, the one labeled only Echo Site. But that night, Kara noticed something new. It happened by accident. A drop of oil from her sleeve smudged one corner. When she went to blot it, the paper gave under her fingers in a strange way. Thicker than the rest. Laminated, but not evenly. Almost like there was something beneath it. She pulled a razor from her bench and carefully lifted the top layer. Underneath was another map. Smaller, finer lines, hidden deliberately. This one wasn't just topographic. It was electromagnetic. Signal patterns, gradient waves, field disruption markers. It didn't show roads, it showed resonance. At the very center of the map was a second mark, smaller than the Echo Site, a black X tucked beneath a ridgeline, and written in her father's unmistakable hand. Secondary resonance origin. Not military. Pre-existing? Kara stared at the note, heartbeat accelerating. The truck wasn't just carrying the prototype. It had been picking something up. She cross-referenced the location with satellite maps on her laptop, using a VPN just in case. It was deep 2 miles off the nearest road, down a forgotten logging trail from the 72nds. No structures. No reported installations. Not even a cell tower. But the ground? It had been disturbed once, decades ago. She traced the route on a new printout. It would take half a day with a 4x4. Longer if the trail was washed out. She packed food, tools, and a 9mm she hadn't touched since her father passed. It had sat in the drawer of his workbench for 10 years, wrapped in an old flannel. She didn't want to bring it, but she did. As she locked the shop, her phone buzzed. No call, no text, just a ping from an unknown number. A single word, run. She killed the phone instantly and threw it into a drainage barrel outside. When she turned to the street, the beige sedan was gone, but in its place was something worse. A black SUV idling, lights off, windows tinted. She didn't wait. She threw the case into her truck, peeled out of the lot, and didn't look back. Not at the garage, not at the shop she'd built from nothing. Not at the place her father's tools still hung on pegboard like holy relics. Whatever was waiting out there in the forest, buried, silent, forgotten it was safer than staying still. By the time the road turned to dirt and the GPS went blank, Kara Jensen had already crossed the point of no return. The trail narrowed to little more than a scar in the woods, overgrown and uneven, as Kara's truck bounced and groaned with every rut and root. Branches scraped along the sides like fingers warning her to turn back. She didn't. Not after everything. Not now. She checked the map again, her headlights cutting through the thick fog that had rolled in fast, too fast. It clung low to the earth, hugging the moss and fallen leaves, swirling in patterns that didn't make sense with the stillness of the wind. Her father had circled this place with precision. Whatever he saw here, whatever the device had recorded, this was where it began. Just ahead, the trees thinned, and then she saw it, a clearing, hidden from satellites by the thick canopy above. Sunlight couldn't reach it even at midday. The earth looked disturbed, but not recently, a collapse, maybe decades old. In the center of the clearing, a concrete hatch, cracked and half buried by time. No signs, no insignias, no locks, just rust and silence. Kara stepped out of the truck, boots sinking into soft mud. She approached the hatch slowly, running her hand along its surface. Her fingers caught on a number carved crudely into the metal, 7B. She recognized it from the files. Observation Vault, 7B. A fallback site for early switchback resonance tests. She'd skimmed the report. It was brief, clinical, canceled before full analysis. But now, standing over it, she could feel why. Something lingered here. The way static clung to an old TV screen. Not dangerous, but not natural either. She pulled at the handle. It gave way after a fight, rust groaning like bones too long unused. A rush of cold air spilled out, dry and metallic. She grabbed her flashlight and descended. The stairs curved down steeply, swallowed by shadow after the first few feet. Walls lined with concrete, wire mesh embedded like veins. At the bottom, a door, steel, bent inward, like it had been hit from the other side. She hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside, a chamber, maybe 30 feet across. Dust thick in the air. Shelving collapsed. Equipment torn apart. A console near the back. Scorched, but still upright. And in the center, a single chair bolted to the ground. Straps hanging loose. A headset still connected. This wasn't just a relay station. It was a testing site, and someone had once sat there. She approached the console, rubbed away the grime from the panel. A single red light blinked, impossibly faint, but alive. The power should have been dead. She reached into her bag and unwrapped the prototype, the X19V transponder. It buzzed the moment she brought it near the console. No switches flipped, no buttons pressed. Just resonance. The screen flickered, then flashed one word: recording. Her breath caught. This sight wasn't forgotten. It had been waiting. She dropped to her knees and pulled a loose notebook from the floor. Inside were notes, not typed, not official, handwritten. Varga. Her name was on the inside cover. Kara flipped through pages filled with erratic scrawl, diagrams, and one repeated phrase, over and over again. It doesn't send signal, it sends memory. The notebook in Kara's hands trembled slightly as she turned the pages, not from the cold, but from something deeper, the feeling that she was holding someone's unraveling. Doctor. Ellen Varga's handwriting, once neat and clinical in the early pages, grew jagged and erratic as the notebook progressed. Dates were scrawled out. Margins were filled with sentences that started and stopped mid-thought. One page simply read, "We thought we were building an antenna. We were building a mirror." And below that, hastily underlined, "The more it hears, the more it reflects. It doesn't echo sound, it echoes pain." Kara sat back on her heels. This wasn't science anymore. This was fallout. She picked up the transponder again, still sealed in its casing, now steadily pulsing like a slow metronome. Every beat was faint, but present. The hum had shifted from background noise to something almost conversational. Like the device was no longer waiting to be found, it was responding. And then, across the chamber, a flicker. The screen on the scorched console blinked twice. Static burst through a speaker mounted crookedly on the wall, followed by the faintest sound. A voice. Scratchy. Distant. "Kara." She froze. It wasn't possible. "You found it." The voice again distorted. Layered, but unmistakably his. Her father. She crossed the room in a rush, staring into the screen. It flickered again, and then settled into a faintly illuminated image, a grainy room, just like the one she stood in. A man sat in the chair, facing away from the camera. His shoulders slumped, his voice low. "If you're seeing this, you opened the box. I wish you hadn't. But I knew you would." Her knees buckled slightly, and she dropped onto the nearest crate. "They said it was just tech. Something new, something clever. But I watched it change people. Not all at once. Bit by bit. Memories that weren't theirs. Grief that didn't belong to them. I saw Reems cry for a brother he never had. Varga spoke in a language she didn't know. I started waking up with bruises I couldn't explain. And then, I saw you, standing in the hallway of my quarters. 10 years too early. 5 years too old." The image crackled, faded, returned. "So I buried it. Not because I wanted to hide it forever, but because I wanted the right person to find it. Someone who could look at this and not flinch. Someone who wouldn't be seduced by what it could become." He turned then not to the camera, but to where she was now standing, decades later. "I'm sorry I left you with questions, but I left you the answers too." Another burst of static. Then silence. The screen went black. Kara didn't realize she was crying until a tear hit the notebook in her lap. It bled the ink like rain on an old letter. All these years, she thought her father had simply checked out, that whatever he saw in the military had scarred him too deep to explain. But now she understood. He hadn't abandoned her. He protected her, by walking away, by welding the box shut, by sealing this place, and a part of himself underground. And now, after all that silence, his voice had found her, through a machine that didn't transmit, didn't speak, just remembered. And now she had to decide. Let that memory fade, again, or finish what he couldn't. Kara stood in the vault's silence, the device pulsing steadily beside her. Her father's voice still echoed in her mind. "I left you the answers too. Not orders, not fear. Just a breadcrumb trail, laid with care and trust." She climbed back to the surface with the transponder sealed in its case. As she drove down the washed-out trail, a black SUV blocked the exit same as before. 3 men stepped out. No guns. No uniforms. But the air felt loaded. One of them, older, calm, approached her window. "Miss Jensen, you've come across something you don't understand. Let us help. Turn it over, and we'll forget all of this ever happened." Kara stepped out of the truck slowly, the weight of her father's legacy heavy in her hands. "What happens if I don't? You'll be labeled, watched, and alone." She looked down at the box. It had been silent for the last hour, but she could still feel it like it was listening. Kara crouched and set the case on the dirt between them, then stood up and backed away. "You can't erase this," she said quietly. "Not this time. We already have. Dozens of times." She held his stare. "Then you're not burying it this time. You're fighting someone who knows how to dig." No one moved. Kara climbed into her truck and drove around them, tires grinding over gravel. They didn't stop her, but she knew they weren't done. They'd let her walk this time. As the trees swallowed the road behind her, she pressed a recorder to her dash. "My name is Kara Jensen," she said. "And what you're about to hear was never meant to see the light of day." Weeks later, the army truck sat quietly behind Kara's shop, cleaned, but unchanged, a relic and a witness. The transponder now rested inside a sealed acrylic case, its pulse silent, but its presence unmistakable. She hadn't destroyed it. She hadn't hidden it. She'd made it seen. The story had gone online in pieces, redacted memos, handwritten notes, video recordings from the vault, anonymous uploads, scanned pages. No one could trace them directly back to her, but people were already connecting the dots. Veterans whispered about. Switchback. Reddit threads exploded overnight. A retired colonel went on record, half mad but credible. And still, the SUV didn't return. Not yet. She knew the silence wouldn't last, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Kara started getting letters. Former engineers, discharged techs, People who'd seen things, remembered things. People who had been told to forget. They didn't want revenge. They wanted the truth to mean something again. She opened the garage every morning like always. Changed oil. Tuned carburetors. But something had shifted. People stopped by. Not for repairs, but to ask, quietly, if she was the one who found the truck. She never said yes. She never said no. One afternoon, she rolled the truck into the sunlight, washed the rust away, painted the bumper, hung her father's old dog tag from the mirror. The radio didn't work, but that was fine. She didn't need music. The truck had already told its story, and Kara had passed it on, not just in files or recordings, but in refusal. Refusal to let history stay buried. Refusal to pretend truth could be silenced. As the sun dipped low and the wind picked up through the pines, Kara Jensen stood in her father's boots, beside his truck, no longer a mechanic chasing ghosts. She'd become the one who listened back.